Looking ahead to this evening, and we will see showers continuing for a while, but eventually they will start to ease to leave a bit of a drier night. But we will continue to see some more persistent rain pushing into Scotland and northern parts of England into the early hours of Sunday. But again, it will remain windy overnight and quite cloudy too, so temperatures not dropping again out of the low teens. Now looking ahead to the second half of the weekend and what will be the better half weather-wise for many, with less in the way of rain, a few more sunny spells, but there will still be the odd shower popping up across England and Wales and a bit more of a persistent band of rain across western parts of Scotland. It will be remaining breezy throughout as well, but we will start to see those winds ease from south to north and still feeling cool with temperatures at or below average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with me, Esther, and my other half. Some might say my better half.
I'd say that.
Phil. Now, look, with 1 in 10 people doing their own DIY dentistry, we're going to be speaking to the king of celebrity smiles, the dentist, to say what is going on. People are saying they can't afford it, but most importantly, they can't find a dentist.
And after a maths teacher was stabbed in a school this week, we're asking a head teacher, who is responsible for all this terrible behaviour in schools? Is it down to the teachers? Is it down to the parents? Is it down to the children themselves? We'll be having that debate later.
And as the Hugh Edwards story rumbles on at the BBC, we say, what did the BBC do about it? How come they never got a grip on that story? What should happen next? Particularly as some of his colleagues at the BBC are demanding front page of the papers today for Hugh Edwards to get back on TV.
And we'll be going through all the big stories in the newspapers today with our reviewers Alex Dean and author and former Labour MP Simon Danchuk. And of course, we want to hear your views today, so get involved in the show. Email us on gbviews@gbnews.com. But before all of that, here's the headlines with Aaron.
Hello, very good morning to you. It is 10:05 here in the GB newsroom. Councils in England and Wales are calling for disposable vapes to be banned in the UK next year. The local government association says 1.3 million are discarded every year, causing litter problems, in addition to being fire hazards and appealing to children. They claim the restrictions would bring the UK into line with other European countries. However, the charity Action on Smoking and Health is against a ban, arguing it would turbocharge the illegal sale of vapes to under-18s. No end in sight to the junior doctors' strike, which is continuing in England for a third day. Doctors are asking for a 35% pay rise, and the British Medical Associations warned the government their doctors will not back down, as despite the Prime Minister adopting the recommendation of the independent pay review bodies, which is a final offer of 6%. The 5-day strike, the longest in NHS history, runs until Tuesday morning. Inheritance tax could be scrapped by the government in a bid to win the next election. The Times is reporting the move could be part of a manifesto pledge to secure votes in the so-called blue wall seats in 2025. Most couples can pass on up to £1 million to their children without paying any inheritance tax. However, the move would cost the Treasury an estimated £7 billion per year, but that's much less than the proposed cuts to income tax. The Prime Minister is reportedly set to announce plans to cap the number of students who can take, in their words, low-value university degrees. The Guardian is reporting Mr Sunak would impose limits on courses that don't have a high proportion of graduates getting a professional job, pursuing further studies or starting a business. If implemented, the policy would restrict student applications in England for the first time since the government scrapped the previous numbers cap in 2015. Opposition parties say they'll make it harder for young people to achieve their aspirations. No criminal offences were committed in relation to the deaths of 2 people off Bournemouth Beach in May. The police believe 17-year-old Joe Abbas and 12-year-old Suna Khan died after being caught in a riptide next to the pier. A man in his 40s, initially arrested on suspicion of manslaughter, will face no further action. The opening night of the Proms was interrupted when 2 protesters from Just Stop Oil stormed the stage. The pair ran onto the stage wearing T-shirts and waving banners before being removed from the sellout event at the Royal Albert Hall. Now, Just Stop Oil say the stunt is a response to the BBC's underwhelming coverage of climate change. Hours later, they also interrupted the taping of the Channel 4 programme, The Last Leg, with host Adam Hills being forced to tell the audience it was not part of the show. Research into ADHD has been given a huge funding boost to help future diagnosis. The Medical Research Council has given £2.4 million to 3 studies at three institutions in England and Wales. ADHD is usually diagnosed in children. Those with the condition can be restless and have difficulty concentrating. Well, the MCR hopes the studies will identify more people at risk, which will enable doctors to offer intervention at an earlier stage. The Met Office has issued a yellow wind warning across the south of England and Wales and a yellow thunderstorm alert for Scotland. The service is warning of travel disruption that's likely, with winds of up to 40 miles an hour. Now, the Goodwood Festival of Speed and London's Kaleidoscope Festival at Alexandra Palace have been cancelled because of the weather. Journalist Nathan Rao told GB News high winds can be more dangerous at this time of year.
Across the south of England, that's London, the south east, the east of England, Leicester, Leicestershire, Essex, all that sort of area. That's for gusts of up to 55 miles per hour, which doesn't seem that high, but remember that the trees are in full leaf at the moment, so strong gusts can cause more damage than they would do, say, for example, in November when all the leaves are down.
Well, it won't affect Wimbledon because of the roof on centre court, of course. Later on, Ons Jabeur will take on Marketa Vondrousova in the women's final. Ms. Jabeur from Tunisia suffered heartbreak last year in the final, so hoping to go one better on centre court this time around. And if she does it, she'll become the first female winner of a Grand Slam for an Arab or an African country. Meanwhile, her Czech opponent will become the first unseeded women's title winner in Wimbledon history if she goes on to lift the famous trophy. That's it for the moment. More as it happens here on GB News. Now it is back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Sarah. Aaron. Now, a new survey's revealed the worrying rise in DIY dentistry in the UK.
The Health and Social Care Select Committee says urgent and fundamental reform is needed to ensure everyone has access to an NHS dentist to avoid a dental health crisis.
In the worst cases reported, some extractions were being carried out with pliers.
To discuss this, we're joined by a leading Harley Street dentist and king of celebrity smiles, Dr. Richard Marks. Richard, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. This is a massive issue. I mean, amongst my constituents, I get loads and loads of complaints about people not able to access an NHS dentist. Why is it so few dentists want to work in the NHS?
Well, I think the system has changed. There's been a lot of publicity about the cuts in funding and how it's been kind of vastly cut back. There's something called units of dental activity, and each practice only has a certain allocation or a certain budget. Once they've run out of the budget that they're allocated, then they're no longer allowed to do any work. So there's a limited budget for each practice, depending on the area, and that's why dentists can only do a certain amount of work on the NHS.
Dentistry always been the Cinderella in the NHS. Have we not taken teeth and mouth hygiene seriously enough?
I think, yeah, the problem is that when the whole health budget's put together, dentistry sometimes gets left behind. And obviously, it's really concerning to hear that people are resorting to DIY dentistry. You know, people should not be doing their own extractions, obviously. That should be done by a dentist. I know that they are trying to increase access for people. It's especially difficult in remote areas where people live, you know, in remote areas far from dental practices. But even in cities where the practices are overloaded, you know, it gets harder and harder to find NHS dentists. The other thing is a lot of the dentists from before, there were quite a lot of dentists from Europe, and obviously now with Brexit, they're not able to come in anymore. So that cut the workforce as well.
Richard, I just want you to say that people shouldn't be, you know, getting their own pliers out and taking their own teeth out, and I think we can all subscribe to that. But I suppose the question is, if people can't access an NHS dentist and they can't afford to go privately, what are they expected to do?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult. There are dental hospitals. So there's dental hospitals which are like the dental teaching hospitals, and the care there is actually free of charge for all patients. So they have like emergency dental services, and they have even some other services for removal of wisdom teeth and things like that. But they're mainly only in urban centres. So again, if somebody's in a more rural area, then it's that problem of having to travel to find an NHS dentist, having to travel a long way, or having to travel to the dental hospitals. That's the difficulty.
Richard Marks, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. But those surveys were really alarming. 90% of people can't be accepted by an NHS dentist. A third of the country, you can't get an NHS dentist. And like you say, what are you to do? I mean, I've been reading cases where a woman has taken out 13 of her own teeth. I mean, what pain must you be in to do that? So I'm glad it's being taken seriously, and I'm glad the Health Committee did that report yesterday.
This is one thing I get most complaints about for my constituents.
Is they can't get
access to an NHS dentist.
And 27% of people see a dentist every 2 years. 8% haven't seen them in a decade. What are you? Where are you?
I haven't seen one for 2 years.
So you're every 2 years. I sort of go when I need to, but prevention is the best way. But look, let's take a look at the top stories of the day. We're delighted to be joined in the studio by Conservative commentator and consultant Alex Dean and author and former Labour MP Simon Danchuk. Alex, first story of today. I think it's front page of the Times.
Inheritance tax. Is the government going to consider abolishing inheritance tax in a bid for more votes? Is the Times spin, I would say, in a bid to do the right thing? The threshold for inheritance tax in the UK is £325,000. Everything above that is taxed at 40% on the death of your loved one or relative, the death of someone who's passed away. Millions of British people, of course, are now drawn into that. People think of it as being a tax for the ultra-wealthy, but because of inflation, because the threshold is left low for longer than inflation would suggest it should be moved upwards, and because of the blossoming value of homes, millions of people in this country are now subject to that tax upon their deaths. And we, of course, always think in the UK as if we've got some kind of unique system that's better than anywhere else in the world. We talk about the BBC like that, we talk about the NHS like that, we talk about tax like that. Actually, inheritance tax has already been abolished by a number of countries that we regard as our friends. The Australians, the Canadians, the New Zealanders have all gradually stopped with this tax on death and abolished it. I think we should too.
Is it going to be a vote winner, though? I mean, I remember when Gordon Brown was going to call his snap election when he was Prime Minister, George Osborne made this big announcement about inheritance tax, and the Conservatives went up in the polls and persuaded Gordon Brown not to call an election. Is it a vote winner, do you think, or not?
I think it's a major potential vote winner. First of all, because people are realising that lots of people are surprised when they realise their parents, for example, when their parents sadly pass away and they're dealing with the tragedy of having lost a parent. On top of that, you realise you've got to pay inheritance tax on the family home you grew up in. So there's that shock of having to deal with it. I do think a lot of people drawn into inheritance tax now realise that they're going to have to pay it when they die and find that a bad thing. But I think a number of people too realise that they worked hard, they did the right thing, they earned income and they paid tax on that income. Then they saved that income because they wanted to put something away for themselves and the next generation. They paid tax on those savings. Then when they took money out of that savings and bought a home, they paid capital gains tax on the purchase of the home. So when you look at the value of the home, and normally the home's the overwhelming bulk of the value of an estate, it's already been taxed 3 times. Yeah. Then the state, when you die, says they want to tax it a 4th time.
Yes,
Simon, I was going to say...
Well, the thing is that you were a Labour MP in Rochdale.
Yeah.
I would imagine that if the Conservatives were to do this, the Labour Party in places like Rochdale would presumably say, well, you know, this is the typical Tories looking after their rich mates. You're paying a higher burden of tax than you've ever paid before. They don't care about that. They just want to look after their rich friends. Is that?
Well, I do think there's something unjust about having an inheritance tax, but you're absolutely right. There's a big north-south divide on this issue. And the problem the Conservatives got is that this looks good for the blue wall seats in terms of appeal in a general election. It will appeal to voters in the south of England, but it does very little for Conservatives in the red wall seats, which I think is the point that you were making, Phil. So from an electoral perspective, this might help shore up support for the Conservatives down south. I'd be very concerned as a Conservative in the red wall seats.
But isn't Rishi Sunak in a tight corner? He needed to do something on tax. They need to be a low tax party. He's looked at the 2 pence off income tax, realised that actually costs nearly £14 billion. This inheritance tax would cost £7 billion. Is that why he's doing it?
Well, I think that's part of it, but it gives the impression that he's trying to shore up support to maintain maintain Conservatives in Conservative traditional seats and doing very little for the Red Wall. And all of this is after the general election anyway. My big story for today's in the Daily Express, it's the front page. They've been doing some investigations, exposed eco plot to paralyse capital. And this is the eco-extremists, the Just Stop Oil people going to campaign heavily all at once in the centre of London in forthcoming weeks. And I think that's a real concern. The police say they're going to crack down on it. Well, it's about time. But from a political perspective, Labour are embroiled in this and they're trying to distance themselves, but they've taken about £1.5 million from the owner of Ecotricity. I think the right thing for them to do would be to give the money back.
Because Dale Vince is supporting, this is the man you're talking about, supporting Just Stop Oil, supporting the Labour Party, intertwined there and what they should be doing, and Labour policy is linked to it, so it is a problem.
I'll tell you what, Alex, say what you like about Just Stop Oil, but they don't half get good tickets at sporting events.
Yeah, I know, they're paying for
they're all the best events, aren't they? Wimbledon, I mean, you try and get a ticket for Wimbledon, it's nearly impossible. They can, the snooker final.
And not just the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah, I mean, they do pretty well at getting these
Channel 4 programme last night as well,
I'm not sure
weren't
the
they?
venues are particularly happy with the results, though. I think this kind of activity... Let's imagine for a moment we were the most climate zealot group of 4 people in the world. We'd probably still conclude that Just Stop Oil is a terrible set of advocates for their cause. Because in my view, they generate such huge resentment amongst working people trying to get around to go to work. They resent huge resentment amongst sporting enthusiasts and now arts lovers wanting to enjoy something that they've paid to go and see. I think it's enormously counterproductive, and I think that the more reasonable people within the climate movement who've got decent points to make about the state of our world should try their best to rein these people in. I thought it was very interesting that the Extinction Rebellion guys were trying to openly advocate to Just Stop Oil, please don't undermine us, don't harm our cause by doing things like high-profile protests at the Queen's funeral or high-profile protests at the King's coronation. I think that's a very good instinct, and if you believe in this kind of climate activism, Just Stop Oil is that one step too far. You should try and row them back.
You see, they all started off with a different route to take. So some of them were doing this publicity seeking, let everybody know, high-profile events. So they thought this through. Others were doing more, let's infiltrate sort of the middle classes. Others were going, let's go through schools and teaching there. So they have thought about this for a long period of time. But now, you're quite right, these eco-lunatics do need to be reined in. But is this all about you, Les, and the forthcoming? I don't know whether it's the by-election there in Uxbridge or whether it's the London elections, because the public there are saying, we don't want this ultra-low zone. Are they pushing forward, saying, yes, you do?
I'm sure they are, and they're trying to dominate the agenda, and they're doing quite well at that. But I think it is about us railing back against this and using the power and authority of the police to do what the vast majority of the public want, and it's about time stronger action was taken.
Just stop them. Now, look, I thought this was an interesting story. How did it get to be this big a Twitter spat? And that's the Tory wife, Johnny Mercer's wife, versus Carol Vorderman, and there seems to have been an explosion between the two of them of, well, whether it's name-calling, but it's definitely a back and fro, and Johnny Mercer's wife saying, look, Carol Vorderman, you're directing 300,000 of your followers against me, and she sort of, Carol Vorderman's turned to sort of an anti-Tory sort of rabble-rouser.
Carol Vorderman has this extraordinary journey, isn't it? Has gone from being sort of the darling of Countdown and
a Cameron advisor, a Tory advisor.
Someone who was good at maths and sort of regarded as very pleasant, to quite a hard-edged sort of online thug against conservative voices of all kinds. And she doesn't... when she's committed to something, she really goes full-throated. And so she's really having a go, not only at a Member of Parliament here, but at his wife as well. And I think it's pretty stupid. One of her attacks was suggesting they lack the qualifications to be in an argument with the great Carol Vorderman. First of all, I hate to be crass, but I can't help but note she got a third from whichever university she studied at, so no enormous boast.
There was definitely snobbery there. They didn't go to university.
But the second thing is, Johnny Mercer, rather than going to university, went and served our country in combat abroad. So I don't think your snobbery gets you very far on that, Carol.
Yeah.
Does this help the Labour Party, Carol Vorderman sort of stepping in? Does it make any difference?
Does it help anyone?
Does it make any difference
I'm not
at
sure
all?
about
Does
that.
anybody?
It makes my blood boil, to be honest. You've got TV celebrities like Carol Vorderman, Gary Lineker would be another, intervening in politics, attacking a woman who's the wife of an MP. It's not popular to say this, but if you do the job properly, being an MP is a really tough job.
Yeah.
And you've got this TV celebrity attacking this wife of an MP. I think it's a disgrace, to be honest.
It's certainly an interesting spat anyway, isn't it? To be perfectly honest.
I think she called Carol big and bouncy. I wanted her toing and froing.
What she meant.
Anyway, we want to hear from you. What's your views on that?
Simon, Alex, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you in the next hour. Coming up, we'll be talking to former BBC presenter Roger Bolton and former BBC Newsnight political editor Michael Crick, all about the recent BBC scandal. You certainly won't want to miss that.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's quite a gloomy end to the week and not much is going to change as we head into the weekend. Yesterday's rain is starting to clear away from northern Scotland, but showers will quickly develop through this morning across the rest of the UK, and these could be heavy and thundery in places. They'll move quite quickly from west to east on those strong winds, but we could see the odd slow-moving shower across parts of Scotland. And with those unseasonably strong winds, it's going to be feeling cool once again. Highest temperatures will be across the southeast, where we get the best of any sunshine. Looking ahead to this evening, and we will see showers continuing for a while, but eventually they will start to ease to leave a bit of a drier night. But we will continue to see some more persistent rain pushing into Scotland and northern parts of England into the early hours of Sunday. But again, it will remain windy overnight and quite cloudy too, so temperatures not dropping again out of the low teens. Now looking ahead to the second half of the weekend and what will be the better half weather-wise for many, with less in the way of rain, a few more sunny spells, but there will still be the odd shower popping up across England and Wales and a bit more of a persistent band of rain across western parts of Scotland. It will be remaining breezy throughout as well, but we will start to see those winds ease from south to north and still feeling cool with temperatures at or below average.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 10:26. Got a couple of your views.
Yeah, lots of views coming in about dentistry. Dee says, my dad had to take out his own teeth in the 1970s. Nothing new. Another big cause is that people keep their teeth a lot longer. My grandparents all had full sets of dentures by my age. I've not lost a single tooth yet.
Actually, that's true. I remember my I don't know if she was great-great-aunt or great-aunt, had all of her teeth out in her, like, for a 21st birthday. They thought that was the way forward. What? How horrendous is that thing looking back? But she is right. Richard here says, though, and this seems to be an apt link into our next interview, I'd rather pull my own teeth out than watch the BBC. Oh, made me smile.
Right, as you say, very apt, because this week we learned that BBC presenter Hugh Edwards was named by his wife as the presenter at the centre of the BBC scandal.
It has since been announced that the BBC Director General, Tim Davie, will be questioned in Parliament about the corporation's leadership following the Hugh Edwards furore and their handling of the scandal itself.
Joining us to discuss this is former BBC executive and presenter Roger Bolton. Roger, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us. Do you believe that this has been handled well by the BBC and in particular the Director General of the BBC?
I'll give you a yes and no answer. I think the Director General has handled it exceptionally well once he knew about it. And the key question is, when did he know and why didn't he know earlier? But I think there are rather more questions to be asked by people like you, frankly, and The Sun. Let me quote Lee Anderson, one of your deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. The BBC is a safe haven for perverts. And we've had lots of MPs in Parliament saying, name the person or whatever, on the basis of what evidence? I think we've seen a rush to judgment in Parliament. And The Sun hasn't shown us any significant evidence for what it said or put its editor to be interviewed. So we've had loads of speculation and very little reporting. What we do need now from the BBC is a complete account, when it's done, of what happened when, and then it should be scrutinised. We have a right to know, but we don't necessarily have a right to know now. And what we need overall is a bit more reporting and a bit less speculation.
Roger, fair point. How do people know? Did Tim Davie know quick enough? How good is that process within the BBC? But I think people were looking for a fairness of how the BBC has covered things. So let's go back to maybe Lord McAlpine. It saw off a DG there, George Entwistle. How about the way the BBC handled the Cliff Richard case there, an innocent man? So I think people will say the BBC looks after its own, which it's done in the past. Martin Bashir, what went on in the past, maybe even going further back, and here with Hugh Edwards, but quick to point the finger at other people. So can you understand people's concern about how quick they are to point the finger at others, but not at their own?
No, I don't understand that. What you've just outlined are a number of scandals in which the BBC made big mistakes.
Exactly.
Martin,
and this could be another big mistake by how badly it's been handled.
No, this is over about 20 years, maybe. And with the amount of broadcasting the BBC do, the number of channels, whatever, it makes far fewer mistakes than almost any other organisation. And in reporting itself in this occasion, it's been far more open, although I think it's overdone it. I think it's got a bit self-obsessed. But I think the problem with all this is the rush to judgment.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
You know, proper questions to be asked about how quickly the BBC responded. But this is not a BBC scandal in the sense that we've had some in the past. This is not an institution trying to protect itself. This is not an institution covering up. It's done that in the past. It isn't doing it now. And by the way, if you're going to take on the BBC, how about taking on the Sun? How about taking on the Mail? How about taking on people like Lee Anderson? The BBC, a safe haven for perverts?
Roger Bolton, for somebody who comes from Liverpool, I think we did take on the Sun, and I think you know that.
We're delighted. We're delighted that
talking about a safe haven for perverts, the Conservative Party in particular, or MPs as a whole, should be just a little careful. People are peculiar.
Roger, we'll try and come back to you in a second, but we've got Michael Crick, who's looks as if he might be doing the weather forecast as well as commenting on the BBC as well. Michael, I particularly was interested that the Newsnight appeared to be doing an investigation into Hugh Edwards before even the Sun's article was published. That's what's been reported in the papers. As a former Newsnight political editor, what do you make of the BBC, in effect, investigating its own people rather than reporting it to the management?
Well, I think what I hear happened is that Victoria, Derbyshire was an event a few days before the Sun story broke, and somebody said, well, what about Hugh Edwards? And she did start asking around, but to whether to say it was a full-scale investigation, I'm not sure that's the case. And, you know, if somebody said that to you at a party about one of your colleagues, you might ask a few questions of other colleagues. I mean, I think overall, the BBC has mishandled quite a lot of this, and particularly the original complaint made by the parents of the person concerned. And I think BBC managers have effectively admitted that they were slow to respond, and indeed, if they had responded properly and had been more dogged in the handling the complaint, then it may never have got to the pages of the Sun. Having said that, the Sun didn't handle it as properly as they should have done, in my view. They failed to take the denial of the young person concerned when they WhatsApped the Sun the night before it was published. They didn't include that denial, and indeed, if they had included that denial, I think that would have considerably reduced the effect of the story and the weight of the story. So both sides haven't really handled this very well, and I think, like Roger, it's time now to step back a bit and let processes take their course. I mean, poor Hugh Edwards is, in hospital, is clearly in a bad way, and it's going to be difficult for the BBC to conduct their inquiry properly so long as he's in hospital. But that inquiry has to be carried out, and the Sun has got to look into, the Sun newspaper has got to look into what it's done, and so forth. But I think a period of quietness all round would be a good thing. I mean, it goes against my instincts to say that as a journalist, but you've got to remember, these are human beings, not just Hugh Edwards and his wife and his family, but also the people who've, the young person concerned, their parents, the other people who've seem to have made complaints. All of these are human beings, and we've got to remember that. And sometimes I think, as journalists, we don't always remember that, and I think this is a case in point.
Roger, just quickly, if you can, the point that Michael made there about the fact that, the BBC received this complaint from the parents, and it took 7 weeks before that allegation was apparently put to Hugh Edwards. I mean, surely by anybody's standards, that isn't handling a situation very well, is it?
Well, that's a big question mark. I agree with you. By the way, I often kick the BBC. I quite enjoy doing it, actually. But I'm not going to kick them that hard on this occasion. But let me say this. We don't know what the original allegation was. We don't know to whom it was put. The BBC says there are about 250 of these things going around any one time. This doesn't excuse the fact that if you'd mentioned Hugh Edwards, you'd have thought, whoops, hey, better red flag this. But what I think you can say, and there are legitimate questions to be asked there. What you can say is once this DG found out about it, he acted very well. By the way, I think on Tuesday, the problem is going to be when he appears before the Lords Committee, is he probably won't have finished all his investigation.
Yeah.
So what can he say? And he's got to protect the family. He's got to protect you. All you can say is the BBC has, in some ways, been more than open in reporting itself.
Roger Bolton,
agree with
thank you for joining us today, and Michael Crick as well. And the one thing that I totally agree
Two of the best of the BBC.
Absolutely.
Would you not say?
And
Two
what
of the
I
best of
agreed with Roger Bolton, we shouldn't be so quick to jump to judgment now. And that's whether it is a politician or whether it's a journalist or whether it's a news producer, because I think we frequently do. But everybody is entitled to then the correct due process. Coming up, we'll be speaking to author and research analyst Dr. Ricard Ashan about his report released this week that wants the cost of the small boats from France. What's going on? How are we going to stop it? How are we going to stop those boats coming over from France? So don't go anywhere.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From Midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. I know, yeah. Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point, but boom.
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel that already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It is 10:39.
Now, a report was released this week issuing a warning of the mounting costs of small boats crossing and the risk of fuelling public resentment. The mid-estimate of hotel accommodation alone at $2.2 billion is 3.5 times the $630 million government invests to tackle homelessness in the UK.
The report offers 6 recommendations, including curbing the power of judicial interventions and introducing an annual cap on refugees.
I can think of no better person to discuss this report this morning than the author himself, Dr. Rakib Ashan. So, hello, great to have you here. I was interested in the bit in the report of the numbers of people coming over, and what we're not really taking into consideration is the upset on the ground here by some of those people who could be militant, those people who could be terrorists. It's a security issue that we're not really talking about.
No, absolutely, Esther. I've said for some time that the small boats emergency is a serious national security issue. This level of unauthorised migration, much of it including arrivals who cross into the UK via the English Channel undocumented, does pose a threat to public safety and national security. In terms of the numbers, over 2022, the total was 45,755 people crossing the English Channel and into the UK. And as we know, in terms of the demographic composition of those small boats migrants, 2 in 3 are males aged between 18 to 39 years. And I think that's a real problem, Esther, because I feel that our asylum system, what it should be doing, is prioritising women and girls at risk of sexual violence in their homelands and internal displacement camps. At the moment, our asylum system is being overrun by male-dominated, unauthorised migration on the English south coast.
Rakib, I think lots of people might be supportive in principle of putting a cap on the number of refugees in terms of making sure it's a number that we can accommodate and we can cope with. I guess the question is, how does that work in practice? Because all of these people are coming over the channel in a small boat. The government are desperately trying to kick them out of the country and are unable to do so. So you can have a cap, but if you can't remove the people that are coming in from the country when that cap's exceeded, it's not much point in having a cap, is there?
No, absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, Philip, I make 6 main recommendations in the report, and they have to work together. You can't really have one recommendation in isolation without the other recommendations. So, for example, I talk about this really urgent that we pass legislation which curbs the impact of judicial interventions, both foreign and domestic, when it comes to the UK government's immigration and asylum policy, especially when it comes to removing illegal migrants from the UK. I think what we have at the moment, our asylum system is being undercut by people smuggling enterprises, and much of the decision-making control resides with judges, whether that's the European Court of Human Rights or our domestic court system. That needs to change. And I think after you do that, you may well facilitate flights to countries such as Rwanda. That may help to speed up the UK-Rwanda migration partnership. And I think then it will act as a deterrence. If there's not flights to Rwanda taking place, then there's no deterrence effect. And then after that, you have the introduction of an annual cap on refugees, which should be democratically determined by the UK Parliament, because I think we need more democratic accountability when it comes to our refugee policy. And under that cap, I'd like to see women and girls prioritised, especially those who are at major risk of sexual violence in their homelands.
Dr. Rakib Ashan, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to give us the details about your report. I'm pretty sure lots of our viewers will agree with many of those recommendations. Thank you.
And we've got to get the law through the House of Commons at the moment. We had, 3 hours worth of voting because the House of Lords don't want to be sending people to Rwanda. I love the Archbishop of Canterbury saying, we cannot accept everyone, nor should we, but there is no counter-proposals, just stop the flights to Rwanda. This is going to be a constitutional big issue now if they pursue double insistence, isn't it?
Yeah, no, look, the government is busting a gut to try and sort this out. On Tuesday night, coming up, I think, this next week, the House of Commons and the House of Lords will be sitting very, 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 very late as they ping-pong the bill back and forth to try and make sure the government can get its illegal migration through Parliament against the Lord's resistance. It's going to be an interesting night, apart from for those of us who have got to stay there all night. Everyone else, it'll be an interesting night. Anyway, badly behaved pupils are forcing teachers out of the profession, according to a new report. The crisis in staff room morale comes as 3/4 of teachers say they would quit if they could find a new job with a better work-life balance.
And this comes just after the week that a teacher was stabbed by a pupil in a corridor at school. Joining us now to discuss this is head teacher Christine Conniff. Now, I have to say, when I read that, and we're seeing more and more violence in the classroom, we're seeing more and more abuse of teachers, but for a maths teacher to be stabbed by a pupil, what is going on? I know I've put a tweet out today. Who is to blame? Is this parental responsibility, teachers' responsibility, the pupils themselves? What's going on?
Well, I think to start with, children are only in school 6.5, 7 hours a day maximum. So, you know, the other 18 hours of the day are with parents. And I think, you know, parents need to set out their stall as far as behavioural expectations. That's where it starts. But schools need to have very firm policies and procedures. It's absolutely awful what happened there. You know, as soon as I saw it on the news, I just couldn't believe what I was actually hearing. And I think we have to have a very firm hand. We need backup from the government to ensure that pupils, staff and parents are, you know, are safe and meeting the expectations for the children to be able to learn in school. Because at the moment, there's too much low level as well as extreme behaviour going on.
Well, in the poll you put out, Esther, 4,500 people voted in it, asking who was most responsible for the lack of discipline in schools. And the vote was 78% parents, 15% teachers and 7% children themselves. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, I think, you know, at the end of the day, they are children and children need firm boundaries and they go through a very difficult stage in their life growing up. And so, therefore, we as adults have to take responsibility in nurturing that, and that starts at home as well. But in school, we have to have firm policies and procedures, and I think there are some times where the problems are or where those procedures are not in place so that you can escalate the sanctions and ensure that the rest of your school community is safe.
We've got views coming in from our viewers, and that is that they actually say the government's at fault here for getting rid of smacking and discipline and stopping any form of caning or corporal punishment at school. Both Jane and Andy sent that in. Would you be happy to go back to corporal punishment?
No. Violence breeds violence.
Do you think that?
I do.
Really? Because we've got violence now without violence.
I've
got
never
it without
raised my
corporal
hand to
punishment.
anybody, never mind a child. And I think the day that comes, I'll hang up my mortarboard because there's ways of doing it. You know, there's heads out there running schools, 1,000, 2,000 people. Look at Catherine Balbasing, for example, the strictest head teacher in the country. She sets her stall out in her ship. If you don't want to be in that ship because you can't behave the way you should do, you're off it. And it's the same with my I work as well.
But you say that, Chrissy, but I would say that there was much better discipline in schools when you say violence breeds violence. I would have said there was much better discipline in schools when there was corporal punishment in schools than there is now without corporal punishment. So
I'm a little bit too young, I might say, to remember corporal punishment.
I got the cane at school.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. I do remember the cane being on primary headmaster's wall, but I think that was some kind of trophy from the past. But it doesn't work. That's not the way to act. You know, they're children. Why would you
But I
ever
guess
hit
what
a
the
child?
question is, what's the sanction for teachers? Because, of course, the problem is without corporal punishment, this is the point that people make, without corporal punishment, it might just have been in the cupboard, it might never have been used, but it was there. Isn't there an issue that children know that actually, when it comes down to it, there's no sanction? What's the teacher going to do? What's the school going to do? They might exclude them. If they do, they'll probably get moved to another school somewhere else. There's no real punishment really, for misbehaving in schools.
I do not believe in violence at all. You cannot hit children. And the government may be at fault, because if these children are going through and getting excluded, it's not a case that they just move the problem on. Where are these children being moved to and what kind of interventions are happening? We've got to remember, some children come to school and their cup is already full before they even start their school day. It might be because what's going on in their home life, their personal life, and they are young people. Even at 18, they're young people, and we have to shape their behaviour, not lead by the cane.
So I've got a school by me that actually does parents' classes. You probably do the same thing as well, but they do parents' classes with the children's classes because they know those kids are coming to school unprepared for schooling, maybe not even being toilet trained, maybe can't even eat properly or just being left in front of a TV. Is this what we're going to do to get the behaviour right? Because we can't have teachers leaving the profession because now the behaviour of the pupils is just so bad.
I agree, because going back to when I was at school, OK, there wasn't the cane, but my mum had a very, very clear idea about how I would behave in school. And we are seeing less of that parental support and challenging schools when they try to discipline children. But as I set it out, this is the way I run my school. If you don't like it, you can leave.
And I think that's exactly...
I think that looked like a do-one sign. If you don't like it, Christine would say do-one. But I think you do have to be that firm.
You have to. And, you know, it's more and more challenging, and it starts at the top. You lead by example, you set your stall out, and if people don't like it, fine.
See, I wouldn't be messing around under Christine's leadership there.
And I agree with that. And I think it is terrible, isn't it, that when I mean, if I got into trouble at school, the last person I'd want to tell is my parents.
Yes.
But now the parents come in and support the child, and I find that outrageous.
And I find that if I were to look at the amount of interviews that I have with people, it's normally about parental behaviour, not the child's.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, as the relentless pursuit of net zero continues, one council is considering bucking the trend and spending millions of pounds on a new recycling fleet that runs on diesel.
Cardiff Council says limited grid capacity and the price and availability of electric bin lorries is forcing them to consider other options.
So how soon can we expect to see affordable eco-recycling fleets? Joining us now is editing director of the Car Expert, that's Stuart Masson. So is this a bit of common sense that's happening now? People realise the grid isn't going to be able to take all this demand, electric cars, electric wagons, and people are now starting to row back and say, bit of common sense, what can we do?
No, I think it is common sense, but what I think we need to accept is that it's not a case where we can simply flick a switch and say, well, we only bought diesel trucks, and as of now, we're only going to buy electric trucks. It is a journey. We've gone... The change from extracting oil from the ground and using it to power our vehicles to now trying to power them by sustainable means is the biggest shift in the automotive industry since the automotive industry started. It's effectively a new industry altogether. And it's not something where you can simply go, right, well, we're not going to do the old way anymore, we're only going to do the new way. And that means upgrades to infrastructure, it means an entirely new design of vehicles. In this particular case, Cardiff Council already does have a fleet of electric bin lorries. They're buying more electric vehicles for other uses, but in this particular instance, they are buying some more diesel trucks. So it is a journey. They've previously only bought diesel. They're now buying some electric.
Well, hooray! They've actually realised it's a journey and you can't flick a switch. That's what many of us have been saying for some time.
I mean, how does it work with the electric... I mean, I'm a Luddite. Modern technology sort of passed me by, to be perfectly honest. But the size of the battery, it seems to me, that you must need for a wagon, particularly one that's going to be doing, you know, bin pickups and drop-offs and all the rest of it. Surely that seems to me it's going to be massive, the size of the battery that you're going to need.
It certainly is one issue, and that's one issue that they are dealing with. But the other issue is for trucks and heavy vehicles. They're at least 5 years behind where passenger cars and family cars are. So they're also on a different path in terms of how they're getting to net zero. There will be other options that suit heavy vehicles better. One of those is called a hydrogen fuel cell. It's still an electric car or an electric vehicle, but it's powered by hydrogen rather than a battery. So that requires different infrastructure, it requires different development. It's still a massive spend to make that happen, but that will be another option that is coming through. But again, that's further behind than battery development.
But do you think people are now more open to talk about let's do this in a controlled fashion? For a long time now, the eco-zealots seem to have run the agenda, all forcing us to do something that is not possible. Do you think people are saying, let's talk about this, let's realise what we can and can't do? And is this conversation happening now that couldn't happen before?
I think it's always been happening, but the UK government set out an ambitious plan to go
Overly ambitious, would you say?
No, I don't think it's over. We are one of the leading countries...
Germany thinks it's overly ambitious.
We are one of the leading countries in the world. We should be at the forefront. We shouldn't be down the back of the class saying we need more time to do our homework. We are one of the leading countries. The EU has to deal with 27 countries, some of which are advanced, like France and Germany, some of which are far less advanced. They have to move at a different pace. But it's right for the UK to be ambitious, but you can't just say, let's set a flag here and not bother to follow it up. If you're going to have an ambitious goal, you need to have an ambitious plan to achieve that goal, and that's what we haven't had.
Because, I mean, how are we ever going to get the grid capacity to basically power all of these vehicles. I just can't see that happening in the foreseeable future.
There's a difference. Nationally, National Grid has always said we're fine, but there are local issues that need to be addressed. And one of the particular issues with Cardiff Council at this particular depot where they're putting these vehicles is that there needs to be an upgrade. But nationally, the grid overall is fine, but there needs to be a lot of work in individual areas to be able to make it work for everybody.
Stuart Masson, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
And charging points and everything
well,
else
no,
that
exactly.
needs
It's a nightmare, isn't it?
come.
Anyway, coming up, we'll be speaking to Lord Norman Lamont on inflation, a royal roundup with Jadita Da Silva, and we'll take a look at the biggest stories from the world of sports and showbiz with Aidan and Hayley. See you in a few minutes.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a unseasonably windy weekend for many of us due to this area of low pressure that is sat across the UK. Those isobars really squeezing together across southern areas of the country, providing potentially 40 up to 55 mile an hour gusts of wind. There could be some disruption throughout the day, so do just take care, and a wind warning is in force. There will be a scattering of heavy showers and thunderstorms quite widely across the UK as well, particularly for Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland down into Northern England. Some of those could be quite slow moving, provide some torrential downpours of rain. It's going to be feeling rather cool for many of us in amongst all those showers and the wind. Some of those showers will ease off a touch into the overnight period, mainly for parts of eastern Scotland down into parts of East Anglia as well, but continuing to see outbreaks of showery rain throughout the night elsewhere. Remaining unsettled, but those winds and that breeze is going to mix up the air, so that will prevent temperatures dropping too far overnight, holding up around 13-14 degrees Celsius for many of us. Staying unsettled as we head into Sunday as well. The wind's easing off a touch across southern areas of the UK. The strongest breeze now more likely across northern England through central areas of Scotland. And there could be some more persistent areas of rain for parts of western Scotland throughout the day. Showers for many of us elsewhere as well. Again, rather cool, top temperatures around 22 degrees Celsius, and it is looking to stay unsettled as we head into the new week as well. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It is Saturday morning and we are live. Now look, we've got Norman Lamont in the studio today, the former Chancellor, because one of 5 of Rishi's pledges was to halve inflation. How is he going to do that? And is increasing interest rates the only way to go about it? We'll be putting Norman Lamont on the spot.
If inflation isn't bad enough, what about all the strikes? Last week it was the teachers, this week it's the junior doctors, next week it's the railway workers. Is there any end to them whatsoever? We'll be getting the very latest with our political reporter, Olivia Utley.
And Judita De Silva will be joining us for the Royal Roundup. There's always so much going on. I mean, this week, Camilla got told she couldn't have her £360,000 for royal duties. How's that going down? And Phil's just told me Camilla and Philip sleep in separate beds. Charles, sorry, not Philip. Camilla and Charles separate bedrooms.
So I read. I don't know if it's true or not. I can't vouch for it.
Well, we'll have to check out
paper.
that with Judita.
And it's the Wimbledon singles finals weekend. We'll be getting all the latest sport with Aidan McGee and all the showbiz with the lovely Hayley Palmer. And of course, we want to hear your views on all of these subjects.
Yes,
so please,
or separate bedrooms, the way forward for married couples. Let us know.
Email us on gbviews@gbnews.com. But before all of that, it's the news with Aaron.
Good morning to you. It's 11:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Councils in England and Wales are calling for disposable vapes to be banned in the UK next year. The local government association says the 1.3 million vapes discarded every week are a litter blight and a fire hazard, which cause environmental damage due to the difficulty recycling them. They're also concerned about how addictive vapes are to the soaring number of young people using them. The charity Action on Smoking and Health, though, is against a ban, arguing it would increase the illegal sale of vapes to under 18s. No end in sight to the junior doctors' strike. It is continuing in England for a third day. The British Medical Associations warned the government their doctors won't back down on demands for a 35% pay rise. That's despite the Prime Minister adopting the recommendation of the independent pay review bodies and making a final offer of 6%. The 5-day strike, the longest in NHS history, runs until Tuesday morning. Inheritance tax could be scrapped by the government in a bid to win the next election. Times is reporting the move could be part of a manifesto pledge to secure votes in so-called blue wall seats in 2025. Now, most couples can pass on up to £1 million to their children without paying any inheritance tax. The move would cost the Treasury an estimated £7 billion per year, but that's much less than a proposed 2p cut to income tax. Meanwhile, the government's considering capping the number of students who can take low-value university degrees. Rishi Sunak set to announce limits on courses this week, on courses that don't have a high proportion of graduates getting a professional job. pursuing further studies or starting a business. The Guardian's reporting, if implemented, the policy would restrict student applications in England for the first time since 2015. Opposition parties, though, say it will make it harder for young people to achieve their aspirations. No criminal offences were committed in relation to the deaths of 2 people off Bournemouth Beach in May. The police believe the 17-year-old Joe Abbas and 12-year-old Suna Khan died after being caught at a riptide next to the pier. A man in his 40s who was initially arrested on suspicion of manslaughter will face no further action. The opening night of the proms was interrupted when 2 protesters from Just Stop Oil stormed the stage. The pair set off confetti cannons and sounded air horns before being removed from the sellout event at the Royal Albert Hall. Just Stop Oil say the stunt is a response to the BBC's underwhelming coverage of climate change. Hours later, demonstrators also interrupted the taping of the Channel 4 programme The Last Leg, with host Adam Hills telling the audience it wasn't part of the show. Research into attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, has been given a huge funding boost to help future diagnosis. The Medical Research Council has given £2.4 million to 3 studies taking place at institutions in England and Wales. ADHD is usually diagnosed in children. Those with the condition can be restless and have difficulty concentrating. The MCR hopes the studies will identify more people at risk, which will then enable doctors to offer earlier intervention. The Met Office has issued a yellow wind warning across the south of England and Wales and a yellow thunderstorm alert for Scotland. The service is warning that travel disruption is highly likely. The Goodwood Festival of Speed and London's Kaleidoscope Festival at Alexandra Palace have both been cancelled because of the weather. Journalist Nathan Rao told GB News high winds can be more dangerous at this time of year.
Across the south of England, that's London, the south east, the east of England, Leicester, Leicestershire, Essex, all that sort of area. That's for gusts of up to 55 miles per hour, which doesn't seem that high, but remember that the trees are in full leaf at the moment, so strong gusts can cause more damage than they would do, say, for example, in November when all the leaves are down.
The weather won't affect Wimbledon later because of the roof, of course, where both women are on the verge of making history. On Jabour from Tunisia is hoping to become the first African or Arab woman to win a Grand Slam singles final. She was runner-up last year at Wimbledon and the US Open. Her Czech opponent, though, Markéta Vondrousova, is aiming to become the first unseeded woman in Wimbledon history to lift the Venus Rose water dish. We'll keep you up to date with the result in that when it happens a little bit later. That's it for the time being. We'll bring you more later, but here right now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Aaron. Now, after Rishi Sunak offered pay rises of around 6% to millions of public sector workers in a bid to end the devastating strikes, the 5-day strike continues by junior doctors in England.
In what is thought to be the longest single period of industrial action in NHS history, the British Medical Association has been asking the government for a 35% wage increase to factor in below inflation pay awards over the last 15 years.
The BMA has described a previous 5% offer as not credible and are continuing with their 4th junior doctor strike in this ongoing dispute. Joining us now in the studio is GB News political reporter Olivia Utley. Oh my. So are they still hanging out for the 35% pay rise, despite the fact they've been offered 6%, but with that lump sum for junior doctors, it's actually just over 10%?
Well, absolutely. They do seem to be holding out for that 35%. Now, where that figure comes from is the unions believe that 35% pay increase would restore junior doctors to levels that they were on in 2008 before the financial crash. According to the unions' calculations, pay has been sinking in real terms ever since then, and so a 35% pay increase is needed simply to get back to the levels they were at 15 years ago. Of course, the government is maintaining that that is simply impossible. It's given a 5 to 7% pay rise to pretty much all public sector workers, and almost all of the unions seem to be happy with that. On Thursday and Friday, the government was sounding very chipper because the teaching unions, 4 teaching unions, called off their strikes and are urging their members to accept. So, yeah, the government is in this bizarre position where it's offered a 6% pay rise for doctors, which works out as an 8.3% pay rise for the average doctor and just over a 10% pay rise, as you say, for junior doctors on the lowest salary. The government says that's enough. Any more would be inflationary, would drive up interest rates even further, have a knock-on effect on people's mortgages, etc. So it's sticking with its line of 6%, and the unions are totally digging their heels in with 35%. So how on earth a compromise is going to be found is anyone's guess. But a compromise really does need to be found because, as we know, Rishi Sunak's very, very keen on getting his 5 priorities sorted, and one of those 5 priorities is cutting NHS waiting lists. NHS waiting lists now at record levels, 7.5 million people waiting for hospital treatment.
But do you think they do actually want a compromise? Do you think some of those people now in the BMA are far more political than otherwise they should be? They're not looking to settle it and get the right amount of money. They're just trying to bring down the government.
Well, when you hear the figures, it's hard not to think like that because it doesn't seem as though, you know, if they were looking for a compromise, surely they wouldn't even be talking about 35% when the government is offering 6%. So it is possible that the BMA has become really quite politicised. And of course, it is quite possible that eventually, with the government really sticking to its line here, eventually junior doctors who, you know, need the money, don't particularly want to be on strike probably, might get fed up and start moving away from their union leaders. I think that's, at the moment, the government's best hope because it doesn't look likely that the BMA is going to shift from 35% to being happy with 6%.
A war of attrition. Olivia, thank you very much.
Well,
indeed.
some of them have said, well, we'll take the 6% or 10% as it will because that actually pays for us for having been on strike. So they're actually looking at it in a different way, as I said, not solving the problem and getting back to work.
Now let's look at the top stories of the day. We're delighted to be joined again in the studio by author and former Labour MP Simon Danczuk and political consultant and correspondent Alex Dean. Simon, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I'm back on the issue of illegal immigration. We saw this week that the government are now going to the Supreme Court to try and get their Rwanda immigration policy through, but even then it can then go to the European Court of Human Rights.
Couldn't make that up, could you?
No, you couldn't make it up. You've got the House of Lords, as you pointed out earlier, who are trying to water down the illegal immigration bill. The point I'm getting to, and I made this point clear on page 2 of The Sun today, is that illegal immigration is at such a point so important in this country. I think we need to have a referendum on it so that the people can tell unelected people like the Lords and the judges who are ruling on this that we are quite clear. We want a strong line on illegal immigration. We want to turn the boats back and we want to take a strong policy. We want a strong policy.
It would be ironic, wouldn't it, if the Supreme Court found against the government and the government had to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights for a favourable judgment. That would be...
Who then agreed?
That would be... What's your reading of this, Alex?
This is a classic example of where the government was right to appeal because, yeah, they'd won in the High Court, lost in the Court of Appeal on a split decision, Lord Chief Justice going one way, colleagues going the other. That's precisely when you should appeal to a higher authority. The trouble is the government's got a pretty spotty record of success in the Supreme Court, so we will be watching it closely. But for what it's worth on the merits, I think the government's position is completely warranted. You know, and there's a tinge of racism, actually, in some of the things people are saying about Rwanda and its environs in their responses to it. And the other reason I wouldn't want the government to give up, apart from the reason Simon rightly identifies about control of our borders per se, is that if the government reversed course now, if it was seen to climb down, not only does it suffer the political defeat, whatever they come up with next will be attacked with the same rabid approach as well. So you might as well keep going with the solution you've at least advanced this far.
I sometimes think they're sort of running down the clock to the next election, all the forms of opposition, because this court case won't be until the 2nd of October, not finished until the end of November, and I think that's what they're trying to do. What's your story there, Alex?
So I chose a story about the, and there's lots of different pronunciations. Is it the Wagner Group, the Wagner Group? Oh, yeah. And the reason I like this story is on the front of the Telegraph, there's a piece saying Putin and co. publish a photograph of the deposed leader of the Wagner Group in his underpants, sitting on a camp bed, his sort of belly flopping out. Is clearly the Russians are trying to... Broken man.
Yes.
The Wagner Group's finished. They're all defeated. That's Putin's attempt. And it's accurate reporting from the Telegraph. That is what the Kremlin did. Then if I look at the page 4 of the FT, Belarus says Wagner fighters have arrived and are training their local troops. So talk about a disconnect. Russia's sole real reliable ally in this space is Belarus. And even there, the Kremlin is saying they're finished, they don't exist anymore, they're broken. Here's a picture of their leader, just emblematic of how they're done. Here's the FT reporting, Belarus saying, thank God, we've got the Wagner Group in, we're finally professionalising our armed forces, they're on the ground. They can't get things right, even between those two lines of communication.
What did you make, Simon, of the NATO summit this week? And I mean, Boris has written today in his column in the Daily Mail about, you know, we should be fast-tracking Ukraine's membership of NATO. What do you make of that?
I think Boris is right. I think we need to be more assertive in terms of dealing with Russia. And I think it's been a failure to be more assertive in years gone by that's actually resulted in us ending up in the situation where Russia's invaded Ukraine. So I think Boris is right. We need to be more assertive. We need to show a timeline where Ukraine can join and ultimately where Georgia can join as well, for that matter.
The trouble is, though, I can agree with you on the substance completely on all those points and still think it's a problem that we've got a former Prime Minister taking a different line to that taken by our serving Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary. I mean, I don't want to be misunderstood. I was the last Japanese soldier on my jungle island saying Boris Johnson shouldn't resign. I did Good Morning Britain the hour before he went. I must have been the last person still saying Boris should stay, right? So don't be misunderstood. I believed in Boris. He won us a great majority on the right, and I thought he was a good Prime Minister. But it's deeply unhelpful to have someone of his standing, former Prime Minister, when we've got a Foreign Secretary out there speaking for Britain, taking a different line. I wish he wouldn't.
The question I asked the Prime Minister this week after his statement on the NATO summit was that, you know, everyone says that we're going to spend the 2% of their GDP on defence, which is supposedly the floor that you're supposed to be spending to be a NATO member. And yet there's a whole raft of countries who keep saying they will do it and won't. And my point is, how are we ever going to get them to do it? It seems to me the only way you're ever going to get them to do it is to say, look, if you've got 5 years to do it, and if you don't do it in 5 years, you're out of NATO.
Yeah, because there's other people who want to come in.
Well, quite right too. For a long time, it was the Americans, us and the Estonians. I know a couple have now met, like Poland, but the Germans and the French have not met it in recent years, and I think it's greatly to their shame, actually.
Do you think we need to get harder on them, Simon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think France and Germany are two countries that have had to be pushed into the right direction in terms of Ukraine, and they finally got there, but they're still not making a fair contribution in terms of funding it.
And Donald Trump was absolutely... He was the one who actually raised this, wasn't he? When he was president, he said, well, you can't rely on the US taxpayer to keep...
And he was absolutely right. Some people don't like the messenger and they therefore ignore the message. That message was completely spot on. NATO allies, if they'd made the commitment that Donald Trump was calling for, would have been in a far better position to support Ukraine in the last year than they have been because of their failure to invest in defence.
What did you think of the statement by Jordan Peterson this week? It said the radical left is guilt-tripping the West into oblivion. I thought he had a wonderful point that he's making us feel guilty, whether that's about the environment, so we're racing headfirst into net zero, making us feel guilty about every minority group, so nobody can stand up and say what a woman is. What do you think, Simon?
I think that's exactly right. I think he speaks a lot of sense, and the agenda is moved not from the centre but further to the left over time. And if you're in the centre and you want reasonable politics and reasonable governance, you're gradually being dragged onto the left's agenda, whether it's the economy,
can't stand up for business
environment.
People anymore. Making money is evil.
Capitalism has become a dirty word. It's the reality is it drives us economy.
I want a one-word answer from all of you. There was a woman here who went to bed speaking with a Lincolnshire accent and woke up with a Welsh accent. And she's a nicer person as well. She doesn't say whether she can sing better as well, but if you had one accent, if you could change your accent, what would you want it to be?
Oh, no, but that sounds like my...
Would you like to
certainly not. No, but this is quite a nightmare, I have to say, isn't it?
So,
soft Irish accent, I think, is very nice.
I think if I could, I'd like a French accent.
Oh, ooh la la, right.
Australian for me, definitely Australian for me. Thank you very much, Simon, Alex.
Thank you very much.
To have you with us. Coming up, we're going to be speaking with the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Norman Lamont.
We certainly are. Now you're watching and listening to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Plenty more ahead, but first, let's take a look at the weather with Jonathan.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly an unseasonably windy weekend for many of us due to this area of low pressure that is sat across the UK. Those isobars really squeezing together across southern areas of the country, providing potentially 40 up to 55 mile an hour gusts of wind. There could be some disruption throughout the day, so do just take care, and a wind warning is in force. There will be a scattering of heavy showers and thunderstorms quite widely across the UK as well, particularly for Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland down into Northern England. Some of those could be quite slow moving, provide some torrential downpours of rain. It's going to be feeling rather cool for many of us in amongst all those showers and the wind. Some of those showers will ease off a touch into the overnight period, mainly for parts of eastern Scotland down into parts of East Anglia as well, but continuing to see outbreaks of showery rain throughout the night elsewhere. Remaining unsettled, but those winds and that breeze is going to mix up the air, so that will prevent temperatures dropping too far overnight, holding up around 13-14 degrees Celsius for many of us. Staying unsettled as we head into Sunday as well. The wind's easing off a touch across southern areas of the UK. The strongest breeze now more likely across northern England through central areas of Scotland. And there could be some more persistent areas of rain for parts of western Scotland throughout the day. Showers for many of us elsewhere as well. Again, rather cool, top temperatures around 22 degrees Celsius, and it is looking to stay unsettled as we head into the new week as well. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
And coming up, we sit down with Lord Lamont, the former Chancellor, to discuss the importance of controlling inflation. So don't go anywhere.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From Midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant the Vickery, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 11:23. So,
controlling inflation is one of the Prime Minister's 5 pledges, but it's remaining stubbornly high.
To discuss the importance of getting inflation down and how it might best be achieved, we're joined by former Chancellor Lord Norman Lamont. So there's the question, how are we going to get inflation down? It's staying stubbornly high, and Rishi has put it as one of his 5 pledges to achieve.
It is stubbornly high, and we're rather higher than the major countries in Europe. I still think there's a good chance it might reach 5% by the year end. What are the alternatives to interest rates, which is the classic and proven method of getting it down? One would be price controls. They don't work. They just tackle the symptoms. They often interrupt supply and cause distortions. The second, because what you're trying to do is slow down demand in the economy, the second is to put up taxes instead. Well, people wouldn't like that, but it's much more cumbersome. If you make a mistake, you can reverse an interest rate cut or an interest rate increase. Putting up taxes requires legislation. It's something you do once a year.
You say that. We've just done a poll now about people saying, do you want interest rates to go up? Do you think that's the best way to control inflation? And the people who voted on our Twitter poll, we've just had 79% are saying, no, we don't want interest rates. And whilst you say you can just put them up or bring them down, I get that. There's a control over them. But do you know what? If you've then got a new fixed mortgage rate, it's not that easy for you to take it back down. You could be locked into that for 2, 5, 10 years.
No, I was talking about for the government.
Yes, for the government, but for the individual, who cares?
On the fixed rate mortgages, that's been a big change in the market here. And of course, it means that the effect of interest rate changes are much more gradual, because fixed rate mortgages all gradually come to an end over a long period of time. And when we're all on variable rate mortgages, you put up bank rate, it fed through to the economy immediately. With fixed rate mortgages, it takes a much longer period of time. Now, there have been some gloomy forecasts of how much people might be paying in mortgages by 2026. But by 2026, I think inflation will definitely be lower than it is now. And inflation, when it comes down, will result in interest rates coming down. So all these forecasts of what people might be paying by 2026, I don't think will actually happen. And indeed, many of them, their mortgages won't have matured by that time.
I guess the other reason why people say, you said...
Well, they say it because they don't like it.
No, the thing about interest rates being a proven method, that's fine when the inflation's being caused by a consumer boom. But this inflation, it seems, isn't being caused by a consumer boom. Quite the reverse. It's being caused by external factors outside of the control, largely, it seems, of the UK food prices, energy prices and whatever. So isn't putting up interest rates, A, not going to affect the rate of inflation because it's not being caused by that, and B, just sleepwalking us into a recession?
Yeah, but 2 points. First of all, there is now an element of domestically generated inflation. Services inflation, which has not affected quite to the same extent as other things, is now increasing. Wage demands have been rising much faster, wage increases have been rising much faster in this country than in the United States or continental Europe. Your point about energy prices and food prices is of course, absolutely right. But you can't alter the only alternative is to alter the supply. You have a supply deficiency, a shortage of energy at an affordable price. You have a shortage of food at an affordable price. You can't increase the supply to bring the price down again very quickly. I mean, we have pressure in the labour market. The labour market is extremely tight in this country. But in order to get more people out into work, that takes time. I mean, you take the Chancellor's reforms on nursery education to encourage women to go back to work, making it easier. That takes years.
Now, there's one thing.
Do you follow me?
I totally follow you. And one thing many of us have said, actually, the Bank of England was asleep at the wheel. It's got these powers, it's independent now. And you were somebody who actually thought it was a good move to have an independent Bank of England. Do you still think that, when many people said it was slow to react at the very start, and now it's pushing up interest rates, again, slow to react?
Well, I think it was worse than that. It wasn't slow to react. I think it was positively harmful with QE, quantitative easing, the printing of money going on for so long. And I would be critical of the bank. But I think because the bank got it wrong once doesn't mean that it's always wrong. And although we may think that they have made a mistake, that doesn't mean politicians running it would be any better.
So you'd still keep it as an independent?
Definitely, yes. But I think the bank is subject to criticism. I think its reputation is on the line at the moment.
When you were talking about the factors that are outside the government's control about, food prices, energy prices, things like that, would it not have just been more honest for the government to say, look, actually, we can't really control the rate of inflation. The rate of inflation is what it is. By sort of pretending that it's under the control of the government, it's causing a political difficulty for the government, instead of just being honest and saying, actually, most of this is outside of our control.
Well, I only agree with that up to a point. I think where the government might have been more honest was at the very beginning to say, look, the consequence of this inevitably is going to be a fall in living standards for everybody. That follows because the terms of trade, the amount we have to export for a given amount of imports, is changing. Living standards are going to fall. But of course, I don't think the government can just say, because we can't stop the inflation of a particular product, energy, we're not going to control the general price level. The government can control, through interest rates, the general price level. One reason it's taking it very difficult to get inflation down, normally when you put up interest rates in the past, they were higher than the rate of inflation. But of course, because we were starting from such a low level, the Bank of England was terrified to put them up above inflation, real increases in rates. But that's what we've always done in the past. And that makes it much more difficult to get inflation down.
We could speak to you forever on this subject. We hope you'll come back again and talk to us further at some point in the future. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Now, it's only been a couple of days since our exciting live coverage of the 12th of July parades across Northern Ireland.
Thousands of people, not deterred by the rainy weather, headed to Belfast to mark the 333rd anniversary of the Battle of the Boyne.
In the fourth part of our series, Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie tells us about the importance of the story of the Glorious Revolution.
Enniskillen was a key strategic town. It was the Jacobite supply routes that enabled the siege of Londonderry. But the Williamite defences here stopped the flow of goods between Upper and Lower Lough Erne.
During the whole siege of Londonderry, Enniskillen remains a thorn in the side of the Jacobite troops. Their supply lines are harried by the troops in Enniskillen. They can't leave it. They haven't enough troops to besiege it because they're trying to take Londonderry, and therefore the garrison under Gustavus Hamilton is able to hold out. So in the same week that the siege of Londonderry is lifted, you have a major battle between Enniskillen and Newton Butler, and it's where the Jacobite supply train and those reinforcements moving to Londonderry are crushed by the Enniskillen troops, and it's again a very bloody affair that takes place there. So that means that Western Ulster falls back into complete Williamite control. In Scotland in that same week you have a very significant battle takes place. James Graham, Bonnie Dundee, has been leading a very effective but small Jacobite force against the government troops and supporters of William III. And at Killiecrankie, the two sides face off against each other, and the Jacobites win the battle. But in the moment of victory, Bonnie Dundee is mortally wounded and he dies on the battlefield site. And there's a big standing stone on the battlefield where he's supposed to have breathed his last. There aren't many tears wept for Bonnie Dundee in Scotland. He, under James II's regime, had been a real hammer against the Covenanters, so he's seen as part of that tyrannical aspect of the Stuart regime. So his death and then the failure of the Jacobite cause in Scotland is not grieved for by Covenanters and the wider Presbyterian community.
And it's 11:33. Let's get you up to date with the headlines in the GB newsroom. Ministers are facing further pressure to impose an outright ban on single-use vapes amid warnings of rising popularity amongst children. Local authorities in England and Wales say disposable vapes are also a fire hazard for waste collectors, with their manufacture and sale stopped next year. That's the recommendation, in line with other European countries. France is considering a ban by the end of 2023, with the European Union expected to follow suit in 2026. Industry bodies, though, say vapes help smokers quit and can be recycled. The British Medical Associations warned the government their doctors won't back down on demands for a 35% pay rise. Junior doctors are striking in England for a third day, despite the Prime Minister adopting the recommendations of independent pay review bodies and making a final offer of 6%. The 5-day strike is the longest in NHS history. It runs until 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. And the Goodwood Festival of Speed and London's Kaleidoscope Festival at Alexandra Palace have been cancelled because of the weather. The Met Office has issued a yellow wind warning across the south of England and Wales and a yellow thunderstorm alert for Scotland. It's warning that winds of up to 50 miles an hour may impact public transport, damage trees and make driving difficult. More on all our stories on our website, gbnews.com. That's it for the moment. Now back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Aaron. Coming up, the latest from royals, sports, and all that showbiz stuff too.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. It's 11:38. Lots of views coming in about all sorts of things, but the ones about corporal punishment in schools caught our eye.
Jeff said parents are responsible for their school-age children. He said if a child stabs a teacher, which is what happened last week, and that happens, then that parent should go to jail. He's holding him that responsible.
Glenda says, Phil had the cane. I admitted that earlier. When I was at school, I did have the cane. It didn't turn him into a thug. The young of today do not receive any form of discipline, but have become thugs. Not too difficult to see where we're going wrong. I always say the cane never did me any harm, Glenda, but lots of people would disagree with that, I can assure you.
And obviously our poll today about who is responsible for the lack of discipline in schools, and that poll came through loud and clear, 78%. It's the parents' fault, 15% teachers, and children themselves was just 7%. So that's what people think. But look, GB News is campaigning to stop the UK becoming a cashless society. The campaign is called Don't Kill Cash, and it's become very popular. We launched a petition last Monday, and already more than 215,000 people have signed it.
The petition is on our website, gbnews.com/cash. Or if you've got a smartphone, use it to click on the QR code on your screen right now to take you to the petition. So help GB News with our campaign and tell the authorities, don't kill cash. It's really important, isn't it? I mean, one of the things I always make the point is that people who are on a limited budget, you know, they often use cash to budget, don't they? They rely on cash. People, and more and more shops are saying, "Oh no, we're card only. You can't spend cash." And I think it's really the people it hurts the most are the people who can least afford it.
It's the country's legal tender as well, and I always say it's like the oil in an engine. It makes sure the country grows round. You should always have a few bob on you. I used to put a £5 down my shoe. That shows how inflation's changed. That was so I could get my taxi home. Down my shoe.
Oh.
In my shoe, so I could always get home at the end of the night. That £5 was not to be spent. It'd probably be about £25 now.
Taxi drivers always say cash is king, but it's becoming no longer king, isn't it?
But not if GB News has its way.
Exactly.
Now, on to our Royal Roundup, and here to discuss all the latest is Royal commentator Judita de Silva. Brilliant to have you on the show today. Now, a bit of a furore, and you can explain this in a little bit more detail, is Camilla not getting what would be this £360,000 annuity that before her Prince Philip was getting. So is this the royal family tightening the belt? Obviously, it was for royal duties, or is she getting money a different way?
She's going to be getting money a different way, because I think it is part of tightening the belt, and also in the endeavours for there to be more transparency about what it costs to have the royal family. So the National Audit Office published the expenditure for the royal family for the past financial year, and they said that looking forward, King Charles is going to be doing more activities, because the expenditure previously based on Queen Elizabeth had been scaled down due to the pandemic. He's probably going to be stepping things up. And so as a result of that, they're scaling back the expenses for other members of the royal family, including Queen Camilla. So that 359,000 annuity, which came from Parliament, will no longer be afforded to her because they said her expenses for official duties can come out of the sovereign grant. So also published in this report, they showed that the past financial year, the royal family expenditure came to £117.3 million, and 107.5 million of that was funded by the UK taxpayer. So with those kinds of numbers bandying about in a time where people are suffering a lot of financial constraints, they have to be seen to be cutting back. And where expenses can be spared, they're going to try to do so. So I do think it's a lot about optics and an endeavour to paint this tapestry of what the royal family will be like functioning under King Charles.
Judita, we also saw this week Prince William was very complimentary about Dele Alli coming clean in an interview, I think, with Gary Neville about his mental health problems. Was that unusual for Prince William to get involved in that?
I think it's not typical, but I think it's in vein of what Prince William is doing to show the kind of advocacy he gets behind, whether it's homelessness or mental health, which going back to the day of the Fab Four, when William, Harry, Kate and Meghan were all getting behind it, that was really the platform they stood on. Why this was so important is because having a figure like Dele Alli, he's a midfielder for Everton, he's had a reputation where he got a lot of criticism for his attitude and his personality. So having this interview with Gary Neville on the Overlap podcast shed a light and a window into what mental health is all about. It's an invisible struggle. It's an invisible illness. So with all the kinds of criticism he had, people now retrospectively are thinking, oh my goodness, it was because of all of this stuff that was going on within him. And now that we see what he's been open about, what he's been going through, Prince William really got behind it to tell people that this was brave, it was inspirational, that it's not a sign of weakness to be open about talking about mental health. Because if you don't open up, people will not know what you're going through. And someone as big and as popular as Dele Alli can face the kind of criticism he just didn't deserve.
But it was a traumatic childhood, wasn't it? He'd been through extreme pressures as a child.
Yes, he was. At the age of just 6, he was raped as a child, and then he was selling drugs by the age of 7 and 8. He said his life was unspeakable. Even Gary Neville said he struggled to find the words to post the video and just said people should just watch. It was not until he was adopted by the Hickford family that he says were wonderful that his life changed around, or you still wrestle those demons. So imagine all the stories of players from disenfranchised families, from poverty, who become superstars in football, and they face the backlash of an entire world, the entire public, but they're human beings who have been through harrowing things most people couldn't imagine.
Judita De Silva, thank you very much indeed. I thought Dele Alli's story was so inspirational in a way that he'd come through all of that trauma. Yes, he'd achieved, but obviously there were still underlying issues to grapple with.
Now it's time to look at the biggest stories from the world of sport and showbiz from the past week, and to do so we're joined in the studio by Aidan McGee and Hayley Palmer, as always.
But first, we're going live to Wimbledon, where GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins has the latest. Paul, how are the crowds?
Yeah, crowds are good and they're getting thicker as the morning progresses. The big showpiece, of course, today, Saturday, the women's singles final. Martika Vondrasova from the Czech Republic taking on Jabeur from Tunisia, who is vying to become the first Muslim Arab African winner of a Grand Slam. So history beckons also for Vondrasova as well. It could be an incredible story. Before Wimbledon, she'd only played 4 matches on grass, and she broke her wrist twice. In fact, she only made a comeback to play tennis last October, and she was so downbeat about her chances of playing at Wimbledon this year that she told her husband to stay at home in the Czech Republic and look after the cat. They found a cat sitter. He's going to be here. So are all these people. Let's have a chat with some of them now. Excuse me, ma'am. Just ask who you're going to be watching today.
Oh, we're on centre court.
You're on centre court. Who would you like to see win?
Oh, Ons, of course.
Jabeur. What about Vondrasova, though?
No, Ons.
Why? Just tell us very quickly, why Jabeur?
Because she just comes over so beautifully, and because she didn't win last year.
Yeah.
And because it would be fantastic to have an Arabic African winner.
Yeah, good for the sport and diversity in sport. Thank you so much for speaking to us. There you go, Anjabur then. So, and I'll be honest, everyone we've spoken to has said they want Anjabur to win. She is very much wears her heart on her sleeve. Difficult not to like her, but spare a thought for Vondrasova as well, because if she wins, as I say, that would be an incredible comeback as well, given her injury problems and given the fact she's really done nothing on grass, and she herself thought she wouldn't do anything at this tournament this year. So it's going to be good. It starts at 2 o'clock later today. The crowd's still filing in, and the weather actually might hold out, although it will be a bit windy. Not that that matters with the roof on centre court.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Good of you to put the Pims down before you joined us, and the strawberries and cream as well. Put those out of camera. So, Aidan, what's your predictions for the final?
I think it's actually look at the seedings, the rankings. It's a little bit one-sided. Anjabur, 6th seed, up against number 42nd seed. Her opponent, and look, last year it's her time as well. She's lost 2 Grand Slam finals. She was in the final last year. She took revenge on Eleanor Rybakina in the quarter-final as well, and sometimes you just feel it's a time for a certain athlete. It's technically not going to be the first time, if it happens, that an African wins Wimbledon, because a fellow called, where's his name? Johan Creek did it in 1981 when he won the Australian Open final, but he did it having gained US citizenship, so technically he doesn't count as African, but he kind of does.
Tennis fan, Hayley?
Yeah, I went on Wednesday. I had my strawberries and cream, Philip.
Did you watch any tennis?
No. Of course I did. And actually, I was saying to Esther, I feel like I should be the fashion police at Wimbledon, because I saw some beautiful outfits, but also I saw people dressed like they were at Love Island, and I'm like, that's not OK. Like, you shouldn't be having your mistress.
Simply not tennis.
No, it's not. It's not. So I'm sorry. Like, there's a rule for Ascot, and
which it seems to have been somewhat watered down, the rule for Ascot. But you are right.
Yeah, have some respect. Like, you just have a blazing covering your shoulders.
Was watered down this year?
No, Ascot hasn't been watered down.
Which was it then?
You still have to wear all the gear there, yeah.
All the gear, no idea. But no, I think there should be some rules put in place, because I was a little bit horrified at points. But there were some beautifully dressed people, which I think we're going to have a little look at, aren't we? Kate Middleton, we got a little picture of her. We haven't, but never mind. She looked great. She always gets it right, doesn't she? Yeah. She's always elegant.
What about the one of the players in the final today? It's got arms full.
Oh, there she is. There we go.
Yeah, there's Kate there.
I'm not sure. Do you like that colour, though?
I think she can pull it off. I think you can pull it off, Esther.
Do you think?
You could,
that mint and white. Oh,
thank you.
Thank you both.
No, I believe in you, you know.
I love the shape of the suit, though. It's just the colours. But then, when you're in the paper every day, you've got to have a different colour.
I know. Oh, there's
Sienna Miller.
Sienna Miller. Now, she had like a kind of two-piece kind of... There you go. It's a little bit baggy for my liking, but she pulls it off because she's kind of got the casual look going on, hasn't she? But,
yeah,
that's
you know,
boho chick there.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like the jumper over the shoulders. I think that's quite a good look for Wimbledon. Phil's face.
I wore a navy
shirt.
Scruffy. If you were talking to me, I'm not keen on the jeans. I wouldn't wear jeans to Wimbledon.
I wore a navy shirt and beige shorts
Aidan, we're not asking what you wore. We're looking at celebrities.
I'll turn to you next.
I want to know what famous people are wearing, Aidan, not you.
Hayley, how does this... I was doing my Barbie tribute today in this bright
I was going to say, and you had a lip gloss underneath your seat as well.
I did, which was bright pink as well. But the Barbie movie, I'm just amazed that it seems to have set the world alight, doesn't it, the Barbie? Is it a sort of pastiche? Is this, I don't know, just a bit of fun for everybody? You know, is this feminism having lost its way? What's it about?
I think it's a bit of fun, and also it's a lot of nostalgia for people. Like, for me, I can remember on my birthday always asking for a Barbie doll. Yeah.
Did you play with Barbie dolls?
Yeah, I did.
I had Action Man.
Oh.
Anyway,
so not Ken. Not Ken. Action Man.
Yeah. But I love Margot Robbie, first of all. I think she's an absolute babe. I think she's great casting. Her and Ryan Gosling are spot on. They've kept the classic, good-looking Barbie and Ken there.
Like every Hollywood movie, like.
Yeah, but what I love about Margot Robbie is that she lived in Clapham for a little bit, and she used to go to Inferno.
I used to own the dance floor.
I really don't think you did. No, but anyway, she says she loves the sticky dance floor and drinking pints in there.
Yeah.
So,
I just think, look, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? I mean, it is sort of taking the mickey. Phil, are we going to get your hair dyed blonde like that? You've got a pink tie on today in honour of Barbie. Are we going to get you in pale pink suits?
No.
Why's Ken? Why's Ken? That's Ken, yeah?
That was Ken.
Why has he not got dark hair?
Because
he's older. He's older now.
Yeah.
What, you realise, get older, you get blonde hair.
He's getting grey like me.
Why? Did you want to audition for it? Is that what that is? Are you too old now?
You need to be younger for that. But anyway, the director says that she's tackled the positives and negatives of Barbie very beautifully. So I think
that's what the director said?
Yes.
She's tackled positives and negatives?
Yes, and there was another review saying that a lot of us strive to be perfect like Barbie, but the film will show you don't always have to be so perfect, because even in the perfect world, we still have flaws. So I think you need to see the film, Aidan.
Is there anything else happening in the world of sport apart from tennis?
Yeah, look, massive announcement. We're expecting it at 1 o'clock. Arsenal finally going to announce that they're completing the signing of Declan Rice. It's weird because West Ham announced it just after 8 o'clock this morning. Declan Rice has left the club, but they didn't officially confirm where he's gone. Now, we all know where he's gone. It's taken 11 days to complete this transfer. It's a record transfer as well. It's an enormous story. This is a record transfer between two British clubs, £105 million all told, including £5 million of add-ons. He's going to go on the US tour tomorrow with Arsenal. Had it gone beyond today, I think West Ham might have run out of patience, because it was all about paperwork and solicitors signing bits of paper and everything. But yeah, it's going through, and he posted a nice long message, about a 1,000-word message this morning on Twitter, thanking the West Ham fans, talking about his journey all the way through when he made those intrepid steps from his home in Surrey, going over to the training ground at Romford, staying in digs, all the people who looked after him.
I guess the big question is this going to be the difference to make sure that Arsenal can overtake Man City?
Well, look, when they were successful back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, Tony Adams was the leader in that side. They need that kind of character in their side. It was just a little bit of lacking of leadership towards the end of last season. A few other factors affected it as well, the injury to William Saliba and obviously replacing him with Rob Holding, but Declan Rice could be the difference next season.
But the all-important news, Gladiator legend Jet is getting married, or has married a woman she met in the supermarket aisle. Only got time for a quick story, but...
I mean, just shows you can find love anywhere. And we were saying, Esther, weren't we? Maybe you can judge someone by what they're buying.
Yes,
in
I
the
think it's a good place. What's in that supermarket trolley? And if you're liking the look of what's in the trolley, could end in a good relationship.
Thank you very much, Aidan, Hayley. Thank you, as always. Thank you to all of our guests. We will be back next Saturday morning from 10 o'clock. But coming up next, it's GB News Saturday with the wonderful Martin Daubney.
It is.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Certainly a unseasonably windy weekend for many of us due to this area of low pressure that is sat across the UK. Those isobars really squeezing together across southern areas of the country, providing potentially 40 up to 55 mile an hour gusts of wind. There could be some disruption throughout the day, so do just take care, and a wind warning is in force. There will be a scattering of heavy showers and thunderstorms quite widely across the UK as well, particularly for Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland down into Northern England. Some of those could be quite slow moving, provide some torrential downpours of rain. It's going to be feeling rather cool for many of us in amongst all those showers and the wind. Some of those showers will ease off a touch into the overnight period, mainly parts of eastern Scotland down into parts of East Anglia